Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. That's how some of Britain's leading politicians are being described following the United Kingdom's shock vote to Brexit or exit the European Union. So here we are, Omar, digital producer of the stream. Show number 3 on the Brexit or Remain. We know exactly where the UK stands.
Or do we?
But what are Brits feeling right now? What are they doing? What's the plan?
You know, it's been kind of interesting because we're hearing a lot from people who are on both sides of this debate, but we're certainly hearing from a lot more of people who are kind of disillusioned with how Brexit leaders have handled things so far.
Okay.
We found this tweet online here of Kembe who says, "I personally voted leave, believing these lies, and I regret it more than anything. I feel genuinely robbed of my vote." And then we got a tweet here from Sally who says, "Supposed leaders of Brexit have jumped ship, leaving the incompetents and the Remain voters behind." Now, pretty harsh words there, but we want to hear from you at home. We want to hear what your thoughts are, so tweet us using the hashtag you see at the bottom of the screen, AJStream.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
I couldn't possibly achieve more than we managed to get in that referendum, and so I feel it's right that I should now stand aside as leader of UKIP.
Now, you just saw 3 of the UK's most prominent politicians either resigning or stepping out of the spotlight in the past few weeks.
The leadership crisis has raised serious questions about how or if the exit might even take place. So to help us talk about the Brexit fallout, we're joined from London by Suzanne Evans, former Deputy Chairwoman of UKIP. Matthew Ellery is a research executive at the organisation Get Britain Out. Hans Kudnani is a senior transatlantic fellow at the think tank the German Marshall Fund. And Gregor Gore is the editor of the Scottish Left Review Journal. He joins us from Valencia, Spain. Good to have you here, guests. Matthew, in one word, describe the political climate in the UK. What word would you use?
Energised, most definitely. Everyone is very passionate at the moment because we finally got what we wanted.
Wow.
But energised is the word.
Energised. Hans, your one word for political climate in the UK right now is what?
Scared.
Gregor?
If I could choose 2, it'd be alienated and disillusioned.
Suzanne?
I think I'd say it is challenging, but interesting. That's 2 words I know.
Right, so, wow, I mean, maybe here's a little microcosm of what's happening in the United Kingdom right now. So many different opinions and emotions. Who is leading, Suzanne, the UK through Brexit? What's the plan?
That's a very good question. David Cameron obviously stood down when he didn't get the result he wanted and Britain voted to leave the European Union. So we're in a situation where we are going to have to wait to see who the next Prime Minister is of Great Britain before that person will take over and take charge. Now, it's interesting because, of course, we just heard this evening that the 2 names on the ballot paper are going to be Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom. So Britain, one thing we do know is that Great Britain is set for its 2nd female Prime Minister. There are some negotiations going on already behind the scenes, but I don't really think they're going to ramp up until September when we have the new Prime Minister in place.
Wow.
So we have some people reacting to the fact that many of these leaders who are leading Brexit has essentially stepped away from the spotlight, like Dr. Karim over here, who says this is Brexodus, something that happens when you don't have a plan and don't want to fess up to the fact that you don't have one. And we have Professor De Selby over here who says, who will lead this forward will be May, but it should be Farage. He's the only one with his heart in this. But Matthew, given the fact that he stepped away from this, I mean, how much is there anybody left whose heart is in this who actually could lead it forward?
Well, the Conservative Party leadership race is now between Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom. Andrea Leadsom campaigned very passionately for us to leave the European Union. She is, of course, the correct person, somebody who I'll be voting for in the election, and she is a great candidate and somebody who can deliver the best deal for Britain.
See, Hans, Suzanne just said that really there's not going to be much in the way of Brexit plan until there is a Conservative leader in place. That's September. What's happening right now? What's happening in the meantime?
Well,
the future of Britain is being determined as we speak, regardless of what happens in the Conservative Party. I spent today in the City of London, and you already see the impact of the Brexit vote. I don't think that the Leavers have any idea of the momentous scale of the decision that's been taken and the ramifications of it. And they still have this fantasy that they are actually able to have the best of both worlds, to have their cake and eat it, as Boris Johnson famously put it. And that actually Britain's destiny is in their hands. We see already, as I say, decisions being taken literally, day by day, that will transform Britain's place in the world, the way Britain is perceived. That's already happened. And the idea that we can sort of wait until the Conservative Party figures out which of these second-rate candidates becomes Prime Minister, and that actually that nothing will happen in the meantime, is sort of typical of the irresponsibility of everybody that's on the Leave side. It's shocking, frankly.
Goodness. Am I allowed to jump in?
Suzanne, you just did.
Please do.
Well, I've never heard such a negative assessment of the current situation. The fact is, Britain's standing in the world is it standing in the world irrespective of whether or not we're in the European Union. We're the world's 5th largest economy. We're a permanent member of the UN Security Council, of NATO. We're on the G7, the G20. This is a great country. And I think one of the reasons that the Leave vote was decisive in Great Britain was because we got sick to death of the Remainers constantly doing our country down. We are a fabulous country, not a poor little island stranded in the middle of nowhere, which is what the Remainers were trying to make out.
But you're in the process of destroying it.
Since we've had the Leave vote. No, we are not. Absolute rubbish. I mean, just because we're leaving a political union, we are not going to destroy the United Kingdom. Switzerland is not destroyed. Norway isn't destroyed. Iceland isn't destroyed. The United States of America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, they're not destroyed. They're not in the European Union.
Let me show you something.
We are literally going to destroy Britain if we leave, because Britain will very likely break up.
This is absolute
because Britain will literally break up if Britain leaves the...
Is it?
Yes.
It doesn't make sense. The United Kingdom is a geographical entity.
Talking about break-up, let's just bring in a Scottish voice here. Gregor, what do you want to say?
My point, Scott, that's exactly my point.
So Hans, let's have a Scott actually make that point. Gregor, go ahead.
What we need to do is take a step back and understand that there's a crisis going on in British society at the moment, which has a number of dimensions. Clearly, there's a crisis of mainstream political parties, but it's also a crisis of the political system, because many people that voted for leaving actually want some form of protection and some form of control of their own lives. But they've handed the political initiative to those that actually want to see further deregulation of the labour market, the ending of the welfare state. In fact, Andrea Leadsom is on record as saying that she wants to see no regulation of small businesses. So this is the kind of situation that we're in, where people who were looking for something are actually obviously going to get the reverse of it. This will further feed alienation and disillusionment with the political system. But as has been mentioned, there's also a constitutional crisis going on at the moment. Scotland was one of only 3 areas that voted for, in a majority, to remain, the others being London and the north of Ireland. And at the moment, the political dynamics in Scotland are such that there is a growing demand for a second referendum. Whether it will be held, the first one was on the 18th of September 2014, whether there will be another one is largely in the hands of Westminster, whether the Holyrood Scottish Parliament can force Westminster to concede another referendum. But certainly the ball is in the court of the Scottish SNP government to make that case.
And there remains a question about the motivation, though, ultimately, of this vote moving forward. So we've actually heard from some people in our online community, like Bamwe over here, who says politics remains political and it's all about the win. The Leave campaign had the best strategy, the both strategy. And Sharifa over here says a fellow MP accused Boris of not really wanting to leave the EU, but simply joining the Leave campaign to better his chances of becoming Prime Minister. Now, I'm actually less interested in whether this specific allegation is true or not, but Hans, I'm just curious, how much of this was a genuine debate about what's better for the UK moving forward, and how much of it was actually just politicking, internal politics?
Well, we had a genuine debate during the referendum campaign. There were lots of lies, particularly I would say on the Leave side, but also on the Remain side. Certainly lots of simplifications, distortions, but we did have a discussion about whether Britain's future should be in the European Union or not. Probably a more intense discussion about that subject than we've ever had before. But it strikes me that it's only now, after the referendum, that a really serious discussion is starting to take place. Particularly about the trade-off that there inevitably will be between access to the single market, on which Britain's entire economy depends, on the one hand, and freedom of movement, restrictions on freedom of movement on the other hand. And I see Suzanne sort of shaking her head, but neither you nor anyone else on the Leave side has explained how you're going to square that circle. You simply just keep asserting that you're going to have the best of both worlds, have your cake and eat it, without explaining how.
Well, I can explain very easily how.
Tell me
there are
how
around
you're going to do that.
170 countries. Well, listen, there are 170 countries around the world that have access to the single market. There are only 28 countries in the European Union. Those other countries that are not in the EU don't have to have deals of freedom of movement with the European Union. The fact is, we are far more valuable to the European Union.
May I just finish? This is the shocking.
May I just finish?
Go ahead.
The fact is, we are far more important to the European Union as a country than the European Union is to us. You said our whole economy depends on our membership of the European Union. That simply isn't true to start with. And if you look at what we actually import from the European Union in terms of trade relationships, they can't afford to live without us. Just the trade in Italian shoes, Spanish fruit, French wine and German cars alone, about 2 million European Union jobs are connected to that, and about £20 billion worth of trade for the EU.
So Suzanne,
there's no doubt that we will get a good deal.
I'm just curious about how prepared the UK's politicians were for what the result might be, regardless of what the result might be. Let me show you something here. A couple of things happened almost immediately after the Brexit vote. 3 race hate crimes every hour since the EU referendum, say the Met Police. The Met Police are the London Metropolitan Police. Matthew, you said you were energised by the UK right now. This is not good.
Femi, this is an important issue about racial attacks, but can we first of all...
So Hans, hold tight for a moment, because Matthew was the one who was energised by this. I was worried by this.
Discussion about the single market, which is
Hans, hold tight for a moment. Let me just hear Matthew for a second. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah. The Remain campaign have had some stuff put against them, or some horrible incidents of racism, but this is by no means occurring only on one side. I myself have received a death threat. I'm sure Suzanne can tell you about things that have been sent to her. I'm sure Nigel Farage has received many, many death threats. The idea that this is happening on one side or caused because of one political event, I just think isn't true at all.
So do you think that it's just a coincidence that the racial attacks have spiked after the Brexit vote, Matthew?
I couldn't possibly comment on the motives of these people. I'd always never liked to be ahead.
Matthew, some of our online community have commented on it. Go ahead.
That's right. We actually did get a video comment from some people actually who are specifically talking about this. Check it out.
As somebody who has faced more direct racism in 2016 than in my entire life, who's seen racism on the rise from people that I grew up with and family members, all of whom wanted to leave the EU. This referendum was a victory, make no mistake about it, a victory for racism.
Brexit is a massive distraction from the real Islamophobia problem in the United Kingdom at a state level. 4 days after the Brexit vote, the Investigatory Powers Bill went through its second reading in the House of Lords. That bill is part of a wider project to survey all Muslims all of the time, because Muslims are seen as potential terrorists.
Hans, I know you were dying to jump in here. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, the issue of racism, racial attacks, and the surge in racial attacks that have been in the last few days is a really important one, and one that I feel strongly about. But I don't want to simply move on from the discussion that we started about the single market, because this is absolutely at the core of the issue of Britain's relationship with the EU. And the discussion we just had, where we skirted along the surface and moved on, is exactly the problem with the debate that happened in Britain during the referendum campaign.
But Hans, to be fair, is we only have so much time in a half-hour programme, so we do have to move things on a little bit. Make a single point in a sentence, and then I am going to move along. But it doesn't mean the debate is done in that.
I can't do it.
Do your best,
because these are complex issues.
Do your best.
The shocking thing is that the leaders, including Suzanne just now, simply do not understand the nature of trade deals in the 21st century, nor, what's even more shocking, they don't actually understand the nature of the British economy. And that's absolutely shocking.
We're in the presence of an expert, clearly.
One of the main issues that has come up in the referendum campaign is that clearly there are many people at the bottom end of the labour market who have suffered from the policy, or the neoliberalism policy of the European Union, which is to allow companies to have free rein over how they operate, to bring in workers from outside Britain. Now, this is not an argument to say that there should be increased border controls, there should be massive restrictions on immigration, but it is to say that at the moment, and for the foreseeable future, the free movement of labour is benefiting capital far more than it is benefiting labour. And therefore, for those that are in Britain, we need to have a serious look at how it is that agreements on wages and conditions are upheld, whether it's through unions or by law, because at the moment the xenophobia and the racism, its primary cause is a result of wage undercutting coming about as a result of migrations, particularly from Eastern Europe. And I don't think either side, Remain or Leave, were prepared to address those issues in a way that could lead to a decent resolution of them.
Let me bring in another voice into this conversation. It's the Alan Smith. He's an MEP for the Scottish National Party. He spoke to the European Parliament quite recently. Have a listen to what he had to say.
I want my country to be internationalist, cooperative, ecological, fair, European. But please remember this: Scotland did not let you down. Please, I beg you, chers collègues, do not let Scotland down now.
Suzanne, what do you do about Scotland?
I think it's about what Scotland does about Scotland. I think the crucial thing we first have to remember is that we had a referendum on whether or not Scotland wanted to remain in the United Kingdom just 2 years ago. 1.5 million people voted in that referendum to stay in the United Kingdom. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, Femi, I've got that wrong. 2 million people voted to stay in the United Kingdom in that referendum. The number of Scots that voted to stay in the European Union was only 1.5 million. So in a sense, I think the will of the Scottish people is that they would rather stay in the United Kingdom, which is a union that is working, that is successful, both in terms of its social behaviour, in terms of its political behaviour, and in terms of its economy as well. So more people in Scotland actually want to stay in the UK than want to stay in the European Union. Yeah. Of course, if Scotland decides through another referendum to be independent and to try and get into the European Union, that is its own decision. I believe in democracy first and foremost, which is the main reason why I wanted to leave the European Union, because it strips us of our democracy. You know, Scotland will have to think very carefully. It cannot just transport itself or stay in the European Union. It will have to leave with the whole of the United Kingdom. If it then wants to rejoin the EU, it will have to adopt the euro. It will have to become part of the open border Schengen zone. I think life would be very difficult for Scotland. And the way in which, I know Scotland doesn't seem to like Westminster government very much, but the fact is the Westminster government is increasingly giving powers of devolution to Scotland. Scotland has more power over its own affairs than at any other time in history since 17 1707 and the Act of Union when it became part of the United Kingdom. I think it would be very foolish to throw that away, personally.
But in terms of moving forward...
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
So we'll get the online community here, and then we'll get Hans's thoughts also in a second. In terms of the original question, how we move forward on who's going to be leading Brexit moving forward, Chase Online says it's going to be May, but with a sad face. We have Matt here who says it's going, now that Andrea Leadsom is on the ballot, I believe the membership will vote for her, and Britain will get full Brexit next year. But we're also increasingly getting people like Chris over here who says, nobody, I sincerely doubt that it will ever happen. Matthew, is your sense that there's a possibility actually that this might not move forward, given the fact that we've seen some level of backlash at this stage?
Oh, we're getting Brexit. There's not a chance that even the politicians of this country could ignore the will of the British people. They have clearly spoken. 17 million people voted for us to leave the European Union. The one thing to be afraid of, though, is the European Union by the back door, which is EEA membership, so membership of that single market that was being spoken about before, which has the same democratic deficit, it has the same over-regulation, and frankly, I think the British people would be unhappy with that deal, and I think it would destroy the entire rationale of democracy, sovereignty, and self-government, which we voted to leave on.
So you want to be outside the single market?
Yeah, I think I was very clear.
You know, guess what I haven't heard, and Suzanne, you sort of explained why I haven't heard this yet, is I haven't heard a Brexit plan yet.
Okay.
Isn't it odd? Is that not a little strange? I mean, this is a historical moment for the United Kingdom and actually for the rest of the world, and you're having to wait until September for something solid to happen.
Well, there are some things going on. There is a unit in the cabinet that's already exploring early options, and there are certainly things to explore. For instance, I think at least 11 countries have actually come forward and said they want to start negotiations about bilateral trade deals with us. So that's a very positive outcome, and something that I certainly hope this Brexit cabinet, this little cabinet, is looking at already. But there is a plan. You know, well, there isn't. I mean, I know what sort of plan we could put in place. But one of the things, I think the point I'd like to make, Femi, is that we on the Leave side came together as a campaign group to get that vote out. It's government's job to enact that plan, and it said that in the booklet that the government sent out to every household in Britain. And we on the Leave side were very much pushing the government to say, look, what are your contingency plans? What are you going to do if Britain votes to leave? And we kept getting back this ridiculous reply: the government's position is to remain in the European Union, therefore we have no plan.
So there's no plan. Suzanne, there's no plan. You've just told the world there's no plan. There's no plan.
Well, they're making plans now, but I think it was completely irresponsible of that government position, and that's a very good reason for David Cameron to have resigned, whatever else might be going on.
That
but
is
look,
massive.
The fact is, Britain is a sovereign, democratic country like hundreds of, a couple of hundred, well, not quite that many, but 170 odd around the world. And we will cope, and we will cope very well. We have good world standing, we have a good civil service, we have good
Suzanne, hold tight for a moment. Take a pause. Take a pause. Gregor, go ahead. Just right at the end of the programme.
Sovereignty talking about that they want, as a result of leaving the European Union, isn't available currently within the setup, nor when Brexit happens. And the reason I say that is that people think that parliaments, whether it's the Westminster Parliament, the Holyrood Parliament in Edinburgh, or the European Parliament in Brussels or Strasbourg, determines things. That is a naive view. It's an illusion, because most of the things in our lives are determined by capitalism and by large multinational companies.
Gregor, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for a moment, because we're right at the end of the programme. But fortunately, I'm going to be able to take Suzanne and Matthew and Hans and you, Gregor, onto our online show, our post show at stream.aljazeera.com. And then we will find out if this is true. Have a look here at my laptop from the Evening Standard. That's a London newspaper. Suzanne Evans declares interest in UKIP leadership despite suspension. Suzanne will reveal all at stream.aljazeera.com. Now, if that's not a tease, I don't know what isn't. Omar, how's this conversation been going down online?
It's actually been very, very interesting. We have a lot more tweets coming in, and we'll definitely get to those in the post show.
Excellent stuff. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in the post show, stream.aljazeera.com. Take care. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. Time goes fast when you're having a feisty debate. Omar, what did you want to share with us?
So we actually got a video comment about how the political dynamics in the country have shifted quite a bit.
Right.
It's a comment from John. Take a listen to it.
Well, Brexit's been confusing, not just because of the amount of misinformation and cynicism on the part of the media, both in print and online, but also because of the way it's divided Britain along really strange lines. It's not a question anymore of being right or left wing or of being Tory or Labourite. There's all this inward fighting going on, and as a black Briton from the north, I feel sort of lost between a xenophobic working class and a finger-pointy left-wing elite.
Gregor, on the point that this is basically not a traditional right-left debate, do you agree with that? Do you think the divisions are more complex at this point?
I think certainly over the issue of the referendum, yes, there were divisions on both sides. Clearly on the left, there were parts of the left for leaving, parts of the left for remaining. But both would agree, despite that difference, that the kind of European Union, the kind of European society that they are after in terms of the left was not available to them. It wasn't on the political agenda. And that's why some of the political division happened, why some of the political rancor. But I think it's also true that the Brexit vote feeds into an existing disillusionment with the Labour Party. You could see that in Scotland in 2015, where Labour lost all but one of its MPs. And at the same time, there's a polarisation going on, which is, although UKIP did not make a breakthrough at the general election in 2015, clearly they have much support. So there's a polarisation going on, but it's the right wing that has benefited from that. And I think that's why your previous contributor is picking up that degree of anxiety, but also disorientation with politics as they stand at the moment in Britain.
Suzanne, I alluded to your history with UKIP. Can you just very quickly tell us what happened? You had a falling out with Nigel Farage, the former leader of UKIP, and now
yes,
where do you stand? Are you practicing for being leader, the next leader? Contemplating?
Well, I'd like to be. I'm still not quite sure what went wrong, but basically there was, I think Nigel, for whatever reason, I think I'll be blunt, wanted me out of the way, and the party found a way to suspend me, apparently because I challenged homophobia in the party. So it was a rather odd reason to suspend me. But there you are, I was suspended for 6 months. Now Nigel has stood down. There will be a leadership election, but because I'm suspended, it seems I can't stand. But so many people want me to stand. I'm hoping they will overturn the suspension and allow me to do so. Otherwise, I don't really think the other candidates have a mandate if they win, or they have a very weak mandate if they win. And I think UKIP members should have the broadest range of candidates to choose from.
You know, when we first started this programme, Hans said that he was scared. What would you say to make him feel less terrified about the future of the United Kingdom?
There's a point to which I can understand why he's scared, because, Femi, we had here a government which was relentlessly telling us how terrible our future was going to be if we voted to leave the European Union. David Cameron even intimated that it would be World War III. Now, how us leaving this small bloc could lead to that is quite beyond belief, but we were told all manner of nonsense from the Prime Minister and our Chancellor of the Exchequer here. As I said, World War III was just the tip of the iceberg, really. We were told that the economy would crash, that there would be no spending for our National Health Service, pensions would have to fall. We were told that there'd be economic collapse. We were told nobody would want to do a trade deal with us. And this negative messaging was relentless. It was designed to scare people.
Suzanne, I have seen a few.
Scared,
but I have seen a few things, because I'm watching this from the United States. I'm not watching it from inside the UK. So I would see a headline like this: Brexit shocks push the pound to a fresh 31-year low. And it has rebounded a little bit, but not how it was 2 weeks ago.
That's true, but it was actually only against the dollar that it really fell to that low.
Right.
And it's interesting, isn't it? You know, the media reported the fall, but they didn't report it going back up again. It was the same with our stock exchange. They reported the fall in the stock exchange, but not the fact that it's now, in fact, higher than it has been for some considerable time. The media is not reporting, as I said, these 11 countries that have come forward to want to do trade deals with us. The media is not reporting the sort of other side of the story. They are reporting a little bit that this emergency budget that the Chancellor said he would have to enact because it was going to be so terrible has not happened. Interestingly, there's also some good news in that the Chancellor is cutting corporation tax by 5%, which is a great boost to business.
Well, is it good news
the
if you're
media's also not
a
reporting the fact
corporation,
that
maybe?
10-year... Well, if you're, well, it's not necessarily just huge businesses, but there's also the media's not reporting the fact that 10-year gilts are at an all-time low, which means the cost of government
I have seen all of those stories, but admittedly, you have to look for it a little harder. Omar, where do you want to take us?
You know, we started this program with some tweets of people who were saying how they may have regretted their vote, and you know, there are millions of people who actually signed a petition talking about potentially having another referendum, and we have some thoughts on that.
Referendum on the referendum.
On the referendum,
that
essentially.
That petition is fake. That petition is fake.
It is?
We know it's fake.
All right, we'll have to look into that.
Yes,
but
people,
we actually got some thoughts online here from Arman, who said there is no legal barrier to doing it over again. That said, the referendum itself wasn't legally binding either. On the other hand, we have Albert here who says if the referendum vote is not respected, there's going to be consequences because the democratic process will have been compromised. Hans, would you agree that continuing to challenge Brexit after the vote had taken place would somehow be anti-democratic at this stage?
Well, I'm not interested in challenging the outcome of the referendum, but I think that we do need a general election to first of all to reunite the country. Actually, I think a general election is the only way to do that. But also so that the new Prime Minister has some kind of democratic mandate for some kind of new relationship with the EU, whatever that looks like. At the moment, whoever takes over as Conservative Party leader simply doesn't have a mandate to make the absolutely momentous decisions that are not reversible and that will determine the future of this country.
Has the mandate of 17 million people in this country. That's the mandate that you need. 17 million people said we should leave the European Union, and Brexit is what they'll get.
It's a negative mandate. It's not a positive mandate for any
democracy mandate. You don't respect
no...
democracy. Doesn't surprise me. It's the Remain campaign. Laws created by 28 unelected people. That's the European Union for you. And I'm not surprised, to be honest, that you don't want to respect the will of the people, that you want to call another general election straight away so you can reverse it. That is just typical of the undemocratic message of the Remain campaign.
The problem with the mandate is that it doesn't specify what was to happen after a leave vote. So yes, Britain will leave the European Union, but we don't know what the nature of the relationship between Britain would be with many other European countries. We don't know the nature of any trade deals. We don't know the nature of border controls or any of these issues. So yes, it's true, clearly there has been a majority for Brexit, but if you were to look at whether there was a consensus or unanimity in the Leave campaign as to what that would lead to, you'd be found sorely wanting because you couldn't find it. And that's why I think it is true that the process is still in crisis, because there are no answers to these questions yet. And it's not just a question of whether the government has a plan B to implement Brexit. I think there does need to be a further, not necessarily a referendum, but there certainly should be some form of voting on what is negotiated by those that are negotiating Brexit, so that people can make a judgment on it. We have had previous instances of referendums on the Lisbon Treaty, and in Ireland there was the opportunity to do that, in the Netherlands as well, and of course in Greece more recently there were referendums on the bailout from the Troika. So I think that it would only be democratic and fair to have some further popular influence over the nature of what the negotiations lead to.
Oh, for goodness sake. For goodness sake, you know, you cannot say that we need some more. A general election isn't going to give you that certainty you need. How can it possibly? And you know, your other guest is absolutely right. This is typical of the elitist attitude of some politicians in this country, that they do not respect the will of the people. They think they know better. And that's why I'm delighted that we had such a strong mandate. As we said, 17 million people plus actually voting in favour of this referendum. And for the same people to come on your show, for the same people to come on this show who say, oh, I'm scared, we don't know what's going to happen, there's uncertainty, and then they try saying, oh, let's create more uncertainty with a general election, is frankly beyond belief.
Negotiations will determine. It doesn't tell you the nature of what the new relationship will be. It's a simple question. And
we never knew what the nature of our relationship was going to be with the European Union if we stayed in it.
Yes. So everybody took a pause. That is a good point for me to say thank you. And there are so many questions. I mean, Gregor, you're absolutely right. Whether Suzanne agrees with you or not, there were so many questions still to be answered and a plan to be put into place. I have a feeling this will not be the last time we revisit what's happening in the UK, because the UK is still trying to work out what's happening in the UK. Thank you, Suzanne, Matthew, Hans and Gregor, for giving us a little slice of the debate that's happening in the United Kingdom right now. A big UK story, a big international story. Appreciate your time, everybody. Take care.